Section 3.5, Order of Operations with Fractions. Section 3.5 is really a review of everything that was introduced in sections 2.1 to 3.4. It is just putting it all together using the rules of, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So, let's do some problems. Let's say you were given this particular problem, 3/4 subtract 1/2 times 1/3. If you were given that problem, you're going to follow the rules for order of operations. So I'm going to have to do that multiplication first. So first thing I am going to do is I'm going to multiply 1/2 times 1/3. When I multiply fractions, I can just multiply straight across. So 1/2 times 1/3 is just equal to 1/6. So if this is equal to 1/6, now my problem is 3/4 subtract 1/6. And now I'm just going to go through that process. When I go through that process, I like to write it up and down. 3/4 subtract 1/6. That way it's easy for me to see what I'm going to change those denominators to. I have denominators of 4 and 6, and in order to add or subtract fractions, I have to have like fractions, or the denominators have to be the same. So for 4 and 6, I can figure out if I wanted to by finding the multiples of 4, 4, 8, 12, 16, it would go on, and the multiples of 6, 6, 12, 18, 24, it would go on. I can see by looking at this that the least common multiple is 12. So I'm going to change both of these to 12ths. If I change 3/4 to 12ths, I have to multiply 4 times 3 to give me 12. And I'm going to use the multiplication rule of 1 and also multiply the 3 by 3. So 3/4 is equal to 9/12. Then I need to change 6ths into 12ths. When I do that, I need to multiply 6 times 2 to get 12, so I need to multiply the top number times 2. 1 times 2 gives me 2. So now my problem is 9/12 minus 2/12. 9/12 minus 2/12 is just 7/12, which is the final answer for the problem. Here's another problem. This is actually, I believe, number 16 in the book. And you can see that I am adding or subtracting mixed numbers here. And I have those in parentheses. So I'm going to solve, first of all, what is inside the first set of parentheses. So I have 9 subtract 5 3/5. In order to subtract that, I have to take 3/5 away from something. And I don't have anything up here as a fraction. So I am going to take 1 away from the 9, make it an 8, and that 1 that I take away, I am going to think of it as 5/5. Now I can go through and say 5/5 minus 3/5 is equal to 2/5, and 8 minus 5 is equal to 3. So I know that that is equal to 3 2/5. I'm going to do the same thing with the other set of parentheses that I have. This is 2 1/2 plus 3/4. In order to add those fractions together, I need a common denominator. My common denominator would be 4, so I'm going to change 1/2 to 4ths. I'm going to multiply by 2 over 2, which gives me 2/4. Now I can go through and I can add up these fractions. 2/4 plus 3/4 is equal to 5/4. And I have a whole number of 2. But remember, I cannot leave 5/4 like that because 5/4 is an improper fraction. So I need to change 5/4. There's all sorts of different ways to do it. Maybe at this point you can just do it in your head. But if I wanted to show it, I'm dividing 5 divided by 4. 4 goes into 5 one time. 4 times 1 is 4. Subtract, I get 1. So I have 1/4 also as my fraction. So 2 5/4 is equal to 1 1/4, and then I'm going to add the 2 and the 1 together, giving me 3 1/4. So now what I have is I have 3 2/5 times 3 1/4. And I need to figure out what that answer is. In order to figure out that answer, right now they're mixed numbers, I'm going to change them into improper fractions. So 5 times 3 gives me 15, plus 2 gives me 17. So 3 2/5 is equal to 17/5. 3 1/4 I'm going to change. 4 times 3 gives me 12, plus 1 gives me 13. So I get 13/4. Now, when I go through and do that, there's nothing at all that I can cancel or reduce as I take a look at those. So I'm just going to have to go through and multiply 17 times 13. Now, when I multiply 17 times 13, I'm going to get 221. And I could go through that work right now, but I'll leave that to you to do that. 17 times 13 gives me 221. 5 times 4 is equal to 20. So I have an improper fraction. I can't leave it that particular way. I need to give it as a mixed number. In order to do that, I'm going to do some long division. I need to ask myself, how many sets of 20 are there in 22? There's 1. 20 times 1 is 20. Subtract, I get 2. Bring down the 1. How many sets of 20 are there in 21? Well, there's 1. 20 times 1 is 20. I subtract, I get 1. So my final answer is 11, which is the whole number, and then I'm going to form the fraction. The fraction is formed by the remainder 1 over the divisor 20. So the final answer to this problem is 11 1/20. As you can probably tell, everything in here is information that we've already covered. All we're doing is just putting it all together. So we'll do one more problem. I'm taking a look at this with order of operations. And as I look at this, I notice that I have something inside a set of parentheses. Now, one thing I do want to point out to you, this 1/2 here is inside a set of parentheses, but it's only there because it's 1/2 squared. We want to make sure you know that that's 1/2 times 1/2. So what I'm going to do first of all is I am going to do what is inside that second set of parentheses. I'm going to add together 1/3 plus 1/6. So I'm going to do that over here, 1/3 plus 1/6, but I'm going to write them once again up and down because that generally is an easier way to do it. For 1/3 and 1/6, a common denominator that I would have would be sixths. So I'm going to multiply that top fraction by 2 over 2, and I will get my 2/6. Then I can add together 2/6 plus 1/6, and I get 3/6. I take a look at that 3/6, and I realize it's not in lowest terms. I can divide by 3 over 3, and I get 1/2. So this 1/3 plus 1/6 is equal to 1/2. So now what I have is I have 1/3 plus, I'm just rewriting what I have, 1/2 squared times 1/2. The next thing I need to do is I do need to do the exponent. So I have 1/2 times 1/2. 1/2 times 1/2 is just equal to 1/4. So I'm going to circle that, and I'm going to go through and I'm just going to write down what that is. So right now my problem is 1/3 plus 1/4 times 1/2. Well, before I can go through and do any addition, I have to do the multiplication. So I have 1/4 times 1/2. In order to multiply, I'm just going to multiply straight across. 1 times 1 is 1. 4 times 2 is 8. So 1/4 times 1/2 is equal to 1/8. And I'm going to rewrite this again. I have now 1/3 plus 1/8. Because once again, that 1/4 times 1/2 was equal to that 1/8. My final step, I just need to go through and add 1/3 plus 1/8. And when I do that, 1/3 plus 1/8. Once again, when I add or subtract, I generally write it up and down. I need to find my common denominator for 3 and 8. My common denominator for 3 and 8 would be 24. I could go through the process of finding that by writing all the multiples of 3 and all the multiples of 8, but I would get 24 for the least common multiple of those two. In order to change 1/3 into 24ths, I need to multiply 3 times 8. So I'm going to multiply the top by 8, and I get 8 24ths. In order to change 1/8 into 24ths, I need to multiply 8 times 3. So I have to multiply the top by 3. 1 times 3 is equal to 3. Now I can add together what I have. 8 24ths plus 3 24ths gives me 11 24ths, which is the final answer to this problem. This really is a very good section to work on because it will force you to practice all the rules we have talked about for fractions and mixed numbers. As always, let me know how I can help. Thank you.